Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr. Welcome to a new year. If you're listening to this, it's just 2020. This is our first episode of 2020, and I'm so glad to have you here listening, where we talk about the art and culture of running an indie record label. Please go back if you're new to us and listen to some of the previous 20 to 30 episodes that we have of other labels that we've talked to. So many great labels. And in the just this past summer, actually, after maybe about 15 or 20 labels, we took a little break and consolidated a lot of that wisdom and advice that we got from those labels, and we put it into a booklet, and you can get that right now at otherrecordlabels.com. You can download that, and that's just a summary of all the tips and tricks and interesting philosophies that a lot of these incredible labels have shared with us over the past couple of years, and I want you to get that at otherrecordlabels.com. Today, we are starting off the new year with an incredible label. One of these labels, when I look back at their catalog over the past 25, now 26 years, I think, man, these are some huge records in the Americana and folk world that had a huge impact on me when I was younger and I was becoming a songwriter and looking and admiring at a lot of these records. Today, we talk with Bloodshot Records, and I'm so excited for you to hear this interview. This was recorded a few months back in 2019, but what a pleasure and what an honor. I reach out to a lot of labels, and I've had the privilege of interviewing some labels that I admire, and it's such a cool thing. You know so much music in your life, and you experience so much music, and I know a lot of labels, but to go to a label's discography on Wikipedia, and as I'm preparing for this interview and just kind of scrolling through things and being like, oh, that's these guys. Like, it's such a surreal moment to be like a moment that record that impacted me, 15 years ago was something that you had your hand in, and here I am talking to you. So that's such a cool thing.
Well, thank you. And imagine what saying the sentence, looking up your discography on Wikipedia, would have sounded like when we started.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I guess you didn't have your discography in any like encyclopedia books in the library.
Well, frequently I'm asked, how have things changed since you started? And when we first started, and we were looking to mail out, flyers for shows or the early promo CDs or stuff like that, I would get on the train here and go down to the Harold Washington Library to the, they used to have something called the phone book room.
Okay.
And where they had the phone books and the yellow pages from all the cities around the country. And I'd be like, oh, okay, so we have a band going to Lexington, Kentucky. I wonder if there's a record store there.
Oh, wow.
You go to the phone book and look it up, and then just either cold call them or send them a package or something like that. So it's pretty remarkable to think about what you have at your fingertips right now.
That's that would make such a cool moment in like a biopic of your life, but where you've got like a map of America, like a physical map of America laid out with a pencil and thumbtacks, and then 100 phone books.
Otherwise extremely drab biopic, yes.
I'd watch it. Oh, that's really cool. And I mean, that's the kind of thing we talk about, and it's interesting talking to labels. I mean, you guys is about 26 years, is that right?
This is our 25th. In fact,
okay.
I think, because the whole notion of being a label or having an official release date or anything like that was so far out of our brain space when we started. It was just such a hobby that we are right around like exactly 25 years.
Oh, no way.
This month when the first release came out.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Hello?
Oh yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's actually, that is really interesting. And it's a good point, right? Because nobody thinks in the early 90s, okay, we've got to pick a date for our 25th anniversary.
Yeah. The release date was when the CD showed up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, I guess it's out. Let's start, talking these around town. And
I've said before that for my label, the birthday would just be the day I registered the domain. because I have that on record. So
yeah, again, something
Something you
that was not even uttered when we started.
well, you could maybe look back in those library records and whenever you first signed out that phone book room. What was the, can you tell me about, like, we'll go back to, it's 92, 93 or so, but back to when everything got started, and when you finally said, you know, holy crow, we're a record label here. This is happening.
Well, those are two very different questions.
Okay.
It was really the three original partners. We were just all music fans. We would see each other at shows all the time. And we saw this kind of music, this sonic space that was going completely undocumented. And we thought, well, let's just put together a compilation of 15, 20 of these bands around town that are playing to like 8 people each, you know, 20 bands times 8 people in the audience, you know, they all have 4 friends, you know, we might be able to sell 500 of these or something.
Wow.
And it was really just that simple and that naive. We didn't really think of ourselves as a label for quite some time. I didn't quit my day job for 3 or 4 years into this. I remember we had a showcase at CMJ in New York on the Lower East Side before there was, you know, Brazilian bowls and boysenberry martini bars and stuff like that. A place called Brownies, and the old 97s and the Waco Brothers played their first New York shows, and we had a line down the block, and I saw a couple of writers from Rolling Stone, and
wow.
And I thought, oh, this could be something. and then maybe a year later or a year and a half at South by Southwest 1997, we had just announced that we were going to put out an Alejandro Escovedo record, and he played a showcase at La Zona Rosa, and there was, I don't know, 800, 1,200 people there, and he came out and was introduced as Bloodshot Records recording artist. And I remember looking around, I'm just saying that gives me chills right now.
Oh, wow.
But I was like, oh shit, somebody of the caliber of Alejandro Escovedo is now on our label. This is serious.
Unbelievable.
We're now in charge of some significant art here. We need to sober up.
Yeah. I want to ask you just for a second about this compilation idea, because there's a label here in my town called Sonic Onion Records, and they got started in the early 90s as well, here in Canada. And they got started with a compilation. It was the exact same story that they just hit their 25 this year as well. But the same story with a compilation. And I also talked to Portia at Kill Rock Stars, and they have a similar story with putting Nirvana on a compilation. I mean, what was that like back then for those compilations? You know, is that really what helped propel you guys?
I think it helped establish both a sonic and an aesthetic identity. And for a lot of bands, certainly back then when no one was paying attention to what they were doing and everyone was just kind of feeling out what they're doing, compilations are a inexpensive way to put a bunch of music together. Those first compilations would have, 50, 60 minutes worth of music on them, whereas individual bands would almost certainly not have that much music to put on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you were able to put out a pretty broad spectrum of sounds and of artists without, having somebody uncomfortably giving you their filler material.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, which was a big thing back in the 90s. Was this on CD?
Yes,
okay.
CD only.
Okay.
And, as much as we were figuring things out as a label, I mean, we were just kind of stumbling around in the dark, doing things intuitively. The bands were doing that as well. So they weren't ready to record a full length.
Right. Okay. So, yeah.
And what we wanted to do, those early compilations, was kind of document a scene that was going on.
Mm.
And then as we got more established, they just became fun. I mean, they didn't become fun. They were always fun. But we were able to do, rather than geographically themed compilations, we did one out of Nashville. We did one, nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to do thematic ones, like the one with based. It was called Straight Out of Boone County. It was based on a record label out of Cincinnati, King Records, the King Federal label from the 50s. It was all covers from that. We did a Knitters tribute record. We were able to just kind of do some fun stuff where you'd still be able to draw in artists that weren't even necessarily on the label, but that we were fans of, and they were fans of us. So
right.
That's how we got to know Whiskey Town and Ryan Adams and a whole bunch of other people. Was they couldn't sign to us or put out a whole record, but they could certainly contribute a compilation track and get their name out there that way.
I find that interesting, and that's the same thing I've heard from other labels from this era is including bands that weren't on their label on the compilation. That is really cool.
Well, I mean, at the heart of it, if you're running an independent label, you're a big music fan.
Yeah.
So whatever I can do to, play with others is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Do you miss that format of the compilation album? I mean, it's almost irrelevant. It probably is irrelevant now with playlists, but do you miss that?
I really do, because it was a way for us to kind of express ourselves a little bit with who we would pick for certain projects, or throw an idea at somebody and have them come at us with something we wouldn't expect. Whereas a full length album, we're very much a hands-off label. So if you're putting out an album with us, we're going to let you do what you want. So
that's cool.
We don't particularly have a lot of input. Whereas a compilation, it's like we're putting together where our heads are in that particular time period.
Right.
And listening back through all our compilations, you can see like, oh, I was really into this band for a while, or this sound, or something like that.
It's interesting, and I mean, I want to, kind of take us back to what you first started talking about with the phone books, because, I want to ask you about this, and I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. But when you got started in the '90s, there were so many barriers for entry. I mean, even when I was first making my own records in the early 2000s, it cost thousands of dollars to make CDs. And I just remember, back then there was probably so many barriers for entry. So the fact that you were diligent enough to go and ambitious enough to go to the library and look up record stores all across America in the phone books, whereas now, I can do that while we're talking and with one hand, and same with when it comes to putting together these compilations. Any kid can put together. I mean, how does that feel as a label? I mean, do you welcome the innovation, or do you sometimes long for the old days when it required extremely hard work?
I'm perfectly fine not having to go down to the library to the phone book room. It was a rather dreary place in February in Chicago.
Well, that's fair.
I mean, I don't ever want to be the guy, waving my cane on my porch. Hey, you kids, get your Frisbee off my lawn.
Yeah.
There's obvious benefits to all this. But the one thing I will say about what this ease of technology has done is I think it has cheapened the idea of art.
Agreed.
The democratization of access. Not everyone has something interesting to say, sadly enough. And I think that when people are able to do whatever they want in whatever manner, that it kind of cheapens the whole endeavor in a way. The fact that I can go online right now and have access to every piece of recorded music, what does that say about me and my journey on this planet? But on the other hand, if you're a kid in Fargo, North Dakota, or some shitty small town, can I swear on this thing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I should have asked that before.
I'll have to put the little explicit tag on your episode, but no problem.
Okay. I'll keep it down. Some grubby little town. It doesn't have a record store. I mean, I was lucky enough, through being when I was a kid and going through college and then moving to Chicago, that I always had access to weird, interesting record stores. Not everyone does, but now those kids who may feel totally left out and alone in the world now have a portal to finding people who will help them realize that there is not just one way to look at the world. And it's just, that is unbelievably invaluable, despite what this country has done in our electrical process.
Yeah. I wonder if, I remember in high school, I was in high school in the 90s, and I remember if a band had a CD, then they were a really, really big deal, and they were legitimate. And I agree with you. I mean, I see the upsides, there's huge upsides, but I do see the issue of everyone can now make a release no matter what, and there is no, and I wonder if it's vinyl is maybe now the new kind of barrier, that when something is, not everything is pressed to vinyl.
Yeah, I also think that there's a certain lack of mystery anymore, or that there's a lack of discovery. Like maybe you'll read something on a website or a blog or something, and it'll be talking about this great band that somebody just saw, and you'll click on the link and be able to hear all the stuff they've recorded, and then kind of make an instantaneous decision and be like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool, and then not really think about it. Whereas, when I'm spending months trying to dig up a particular weird punk rock record, you're gonna have a bit more of an attachment to it. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I read in Jeff Tweedy's book, the one that came out last year, it's something that just blew me away, where he would read about an album from a magazine, and then he would decide on which album to buy from the description of the reviewer, and then then mail away for that record.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being in the punk rock scene in Detroit in the early 80s, we'd hear about bands, and you'd never heard them, or maybe one guy you knew like 4 suburbs over had gotten the 7-inch, but they would come into the, hey, sorry, I'm doing an interview right now. So like somebody like the Misfits would come through town, and we had heard like there was this rumor going through town that like a few days before some kid was stage diving, and one of the guitar players didn't like that and broke his arm, like beating him with his guitar. And it's like, so there's this rumor, and then, this excitement, and whether or not it was true, nobody knows, but it's like still nothing that you could verify.
Yeah,
it's like
that's
mystery.
Right. Mystery. Yeah.
And then, or you'd hear about this great band and you'd see their flyer, and then you would go and maybe you'd hate them, but maybe they would just be unbelievable. But the anticipation for weeks of like, God, what is this going to be like?
Yeah.
Now you can be like, what is this going to be like? And 8 seconds later, no.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
And I also think that it's got to be tough to be a band or a label like starting off right now, because everything you do is so overly documented. How can you develop a sound, or how can you try things and fail without it being documented and commented upon exhaustively? It's that was what was so great about being in Chicago, was there were so many stages, so many different clubs, and so many bands that were allowed on these stages that people could just try stuff without fear of failure, or without an expectation of necessarily succeeding, but without, people judging it too harshly.
Yeah, right.
It didn't work. They could try something else the next week.
It's almost like what I've heard that it still exists today for comedians, where they can go to a super tiny club and try out material, then completely abandon it, and somehow it's not as digitized as music has become.
Right. And to go back to your vinyl point, I think that, I can have 47,000 songs on my hard drive and have my Spotify playlists up and down, but who cares? And I think that there is a longing for some sort of totemic connection to the band and the art, and and vinyl speaks to that. They can hold it. They can look at the liner notes. There are it's something that exists in that moment, but also beyond that moment. Whereas everything else it just seems so ephemeral.
It's such I totally agree. And this might sound weird to some people, but it is such an intimate experience to think, especially from indie music, when I get a record in the mail, just to think that, they've had their hands on this, likely, or it just feels like it's a really personal connection to them, as opposed to just streaming something off of another website.
Yeah. Or like going to your Spotify or your Pandora account or whatever, I'm going, I'm sad. Where's my sad playlist?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm mad. Where's my mad playlist?
Speaking of the big bad digitals, what was the music scene like in the early 90s? I imagine it was kind of, or in the mid 90s, I imagine it was a bit of a heyday because Napster was still a few years away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people had to pay for music. And when there is money involved, the people who have a lot of it want more of it. So all the major labels decided to just keep treating their customers like suckers. So they kept raising the prices of CDs, made it harder and harder you couldn't buy them at shows. They clamped down on that. And then so all of a sudden you have like 1998 CD list prices in stores. So they helped create an environment that when the technology came along to rip off the record labels, why wouldn't people?
Right.
And when Napster first started hitting and the major labels and some of the big stars were complaining about lost income, I remember Don Henley going to Capitol Hill to testify against Congress and complain about how much money he was losing. And there I was as an independent record label going, well, if it's pissing Don Henley off, then I'm all for it, even though it's like kind of biting sure. My nose off despite my face. It's like, oh, well, if Don Henley is getting hurt by this, then it can't be all bad. And it just seemed like, yeah, the heyday, the gold rush of that CD era just helped fuel this enormous backlash where the law and the unintended consequences, it took a long time to catch up with the technology.
How are you guys being different? How are you treating your customers differently than these big labels who are repackaging records or putting filler songs on?
Well, I think it all starts with the premise that we're not putting out garbage.
Yeah.
We always resisted pressure from our distributors and from stores to raise our prices. We try and keep things affordable. We try and keep things simple. We don't keep repackaging things. We don't. Yeah, it just, and we don't put out crap. I mean, you just try and you treat them like you want to be treated. We're music fans. You want to treat them like a music fan. You don't want to treat them like we're grabbing them by the ankles and holding them upside down and shaking all the money out of them.
Yeah. It's so were you were aware of that goal to stay with that indie ethos back then, even in the 90s? Like, were you ever tempted to try to sign a hit single or something like that?
I don't think any of us have that in our DNA.
That's great.
It's not like we're intentionally trying to fail,
yeah,
or not be huge. But,
right.
I've got Groucho Marx syndrome. I'm not keen to join a club that would have me as a member. And popular culture in general just kind of makes me stand back with a jaundiced eye. So if all of a sudden I'm in a room with 5,000 people who are going crazy over something, I'm going to be standing in the back going, I don't trust it.
Let's talk about the origins of the label in that country and roots genre. Can you describe that a little bit? Because, I mean, obviously what some people would think of back then, as new country is completely different from the alt country of Whiskey Town and early Wilco. There was something more punkish about it. How did that genre come to be the early sound of Bloodshot?
Well, it goes back to what we were doing at that time. Again, the three founders all had huge and varied record collections. But what was happening in Chicago at the time was it was being looked at as the post-Seattle next big thing.
Okay.
With bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Urge Overkill and Liz Phair and a whole bunch of others, there was this kind of indie rock thing that was happening here that, to me, in a lot of ways, and a lot of the bands, was striking me as just not very interesting. And then I would be going to the clubs and seeing these bands that were doing weird things with roots music, and there seemed to be a lot of them around town. And we just thought, okay, let's put these all together and see what happens. Let's document this part of the Chicago scene that is going totally unnoticed.
Right.
And as soon as we put that out, we started to hear from fans in St. Louis and Dallas and New York and the Bay Area and Denver, Phoenix. They were like, hey, we've got a couple of bands like this too.
Right.
And I think I can only speak for myself in a way, but having grown up in the punk scene and then seeing it commodified through Lollapalooza and, Martha Stewart grunge themed parties and things like that, it just seemed like this thing that I held dear was now just becoming the next thing. And that the people who used to beat the crap out of me in high school were like, oh yeah, man, have you heard the new Flipper album? And I'd be like, oh God, 10 years ago you were beating the snot out of me for listening to Flipper.
How did Chicago get a roots sound? How did Chicago get that almost Southern sound?
That's a long conversation for another day. So I would say that a lot of people in the punk scenes were getting tired of seeing this thing that they was kind of a secret club for them turning into this mainstream thing. And what's more punk than Johnny Cash singing "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die"?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, a lot of people were kind of finding the rawness and the immediacy and the connection to the audience that they originally found in punk, and they were finding it in early country music and honky tonk, and I think the fact that Chicago was in the center of the country, and any indie band who was doing any kind of national tour would come through Chicago, and you would get bands like the Bad Livers or the Blasters or Charlie Pickett or things like that would kind of spread these little seeds of roots awareness, and then people would pick up on it. Like, I didn't know that the Cramps were covering all these weird old dudes from the 50s. I just thought it was their stuff, and then it wasn't until later that I started to dig into their catalog. And so then you started to go back, and I think it was just this moment in looking again, you're in your mid to late 20s, you're too tired to roll over police cars in some sort of riot, but you still don't feel like you're part of the mainstream. So all of a sudden you're listening to Hank Williams all the time, or Patsy Cline, or, I like how amazing Loretta Lynn was with her social commentary and stuff. And Johnny Paycheck with Pardon Me, I've got someone to kill. You're like, holy shit, this is amazing punk rock stuff. Well, decades before punk rock existed. Right.
Yes, that's right. And they were all coming from a place of integrity too. And I because they were like, for someone like Johnny Cash, when he and so I wanted to ask you had mentioned Johnny Cash, was this around the time of his final era with Rick Rubin, like late 90s?
Yeah, I think his first the fan base that really discovered him in that last leg of his journey, I guess, were the people who were coming at him from indie rock and underground circles. I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that his rediscovered popularity initially came through Rick Rubin and American Recordings, and he was playing like rock clubs. It's like half a dozen years before that, he was playing to half-empty band shells at county fairs.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Or like Pennsylvania bus tours or something.
Yeah. So the mainstream country establishment had turned their backs on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, and I'm fascinated because I got into that genre a lot. I mean, I was really, and I think it was probably Johnny Cash, and I remember when they had that Unearthed box set, and I really got into that. And Lost Highway Records was around the same time, and I just remember kind of scooping all of that up. And I think, like, was that genre? Tell me your experience with that, because there was a time, and maybe I'm just biased, but I feel like there was a time where the mainstream started to accept it. I mean, specifically around the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" soundtrack time, that the mainstream was starting to accept Americana a little bit. Did that happen?
I every few years there's going to be a record where the people who have a deep vested interest in the music industry writ large, that have bonuses and corner offices and island vacations and stuff like that see something like that. They see the "Oh Brother" thing, and they're like, okay, let's run this into the ground.
Yeah,
let's
right.
Ride this horse till it drops. And we had we had done a bunch of weird bluegrassy things before that, and then all of a sudden our distributor and writers are like, so you must be getting quite a bump from this bluegrass revival. And I'm like, oh my god. So when Gillian Welch and David Rawlings came out with their first, around 2000, everyone was like, oh yeah, the mainstream is ready for this, and so they start to smell money around it, and then they'll take a few artists like maybe the Jayhawks or Whiskey Town or something and try and make pop stars out of them, or broader country stars, and it doesn't work, and then they'll go around and sniff around another hydrant until they think they'll find some money somewhere else.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Were you guys pressing vinyl the whole time, or when did? How did that?
We would license out things because there was really zero vinyl market.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
They are expensive, and we were, existing on the margins. For the first few years, we wouldn't really put out another record till the last one made its money back.
Right.
We didn't. None of us were drawing a salary. We all kept our day jobs, so it was just prohibitively expensive, and really no one was buying it because everyone was still like enamored with this fantastic new CD technology, and everyone was box setting everything, and everyone was putting like 60 or 71.5 minutes worth of music on every CD, and just every little piece of plastic they could on there. So there was no market for it.
Even though, that's true. But I always felt like the roots and country genre was one of the earliest just because it sounded so great on vinyl. Well, yeah, it was. It
indisputably sounds better and warmer and more personal. But as any drive-through McDonald's will attest, convenience. Yeah, convenience outweighs a lot of things. Most of it.
It's great. No, I totally agree. Was there? So at what point did the vinyl boom happen enough for you guys to say every record is getting a vinyl release?
I would say about 2007, 2008, some of our bigger releases, we would have a limited vinyl component to it, and then it just kept growing, and to the point now where we're actually planning on some releases this fall that will have no CD component.
Wow.
So it's flipped entirely. When I was a DJ on my college radio station, some of the promos I was getting would be the early CDs, and they would have bonus tracks.
Oh, wow.
And now, and to get people away from buying the LP, because LPs are temperamental, more expensive to make, more expensive to ship, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're seeing some people actually putting bonus tracks back on CDs to try and get people to go back to maybe buying some CDs.
Okay, so looking at your catalog, and I said this at the beginning, that really took me back. There's some incredible records. I was a huge fan, still am, of the Ben Queller stuff. I loved the records that he's done, and Heartbreaker obviously was huge, and Whiskey Town. Is there any specific releases that had a significant impact on the label in your mind?
In what way? Financially, or
I mean, I suppose. Well, however, answer that however you think. I mean, I suppose financially would have a significant.
Don't ask me to be a bad parent and pick one child over another. I love them all equally.
Was there any that felt like a turning point?
Well, I think. Certainly Heartbreaker put us in a position where it was terrifying when it first started to hit, because it was on a scale of nothing that we had ever seen before and nothing that we were prepared for. So I'm calling up the CD manufacturer going, yeah, you know how I usually order like CDs 5,000 or 1,000 at a time? I need 50,000 of these.
Oh my gosh.
And they're like, okay, can you pay for those? And we'd be like, no.
Oh my gosh.
So
what made that record tip? I don't really remember it when it came out.
It was just, it was lightning in a bottle. It was like, it was just his abilities and the marketplace at the time.
Right.
Everything was right there.
Right.
And in some ways it was so effortless.
What?
And looking back, it just seems so natural. But coincidentally, we had a flood in our basement here a couple months ago, mm-hmm. and I've been going through all these boxes that were down there, and I'm finding all these like purchase orders and invoices from that time period, and it brought back the flood of anxiety of like, oh my God, this is serious. Like we had no idea. Like I'd be looking at like one invoice that was for, or a purchase order for like, oh, we need 10,000. And then like 2 weeks later be like, I need 40,000. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, I need tens of thousands more. And,
wow.
And it was just crazy.
So you weren't enjoying it? You weren't celebrating it?
I'm enjoying it. I was enjoying it in retrospect, but in the moment, yeah, it was rather terrifying.
Yeah.
And unbelievable. It's just how, we didn't have any idea what to do with it.
Obviously, I mean, in hindsight's 2020, and that's a great record, and there's talent there, obviously. But what were you guys doing to promote that record? I mean, you must have been responsible for some of its success.
I'm not one that particularly can take compliments or credit for much.
Okay.
I think a lot of our work on that record was the build up to it. Mm-hmm. Our association with Ryan and Whiskey Town before that, with compilations and singles and helping define perhaps a little of what the genre was and making the marketplace ready for that record. But really, when it came out, mostly our job was to just keep up.
Right.
It took on a life of its own.
It was already kind of breaking right on the release date.
Slow burn. I mean, it was our initial sales hopes were 10 to 20,000, and we quickly, within 2 or 3 months, it was like, okay, this is huge, or it's getting a lot of traction. But the sales for that thing didn't crest for like 6 or 8 months. So it just kept building and kept building. And its release tour show in Chicago was at a club called Shuba's, which holds about 150 people.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't right out of the gates. We knew what we had, but it was this cresting tide.
What was there? Was there a certain publication that you guys would turn to or that you would aspire to be covered by back then?
No, because I guess, no, it wasn't a conscious decision not to do that. I mean, when you read history of Sub Pop and stuff like that, like they tried to get whoever from the UK press over or something like that. I guess maybe we weren't smart enough to think about it. I mean, we're just so deeply ingrained in grassroots kind of trench warfare that thinking about pitching it to the places that eventually did pick up on it, like, the Rolling Stones and New York Times and Mojo's and Guardian and all those really high up media outlets, they came to us. So,
wow. After the fact.
Yeah.
So how did that record, what was the next release after that? not by Ryan, but from Bloodshot. And did you have any sort of confidence, or did you have a bigger budget for the next release on your label?
Well, I don't know specifically, but just judging by the catalog numbers, I would say that one of the first releases after that was, we like to do stupid things, and we like to do things that entertain us. So I think our next record was an anti-death penalty song.
Okay.
A compilation with people doing murder ballads to raise money for the Illinois Coalition to abolish the death penalty. And again, it wasn't a plan. You can't plan for Ryan to be huge.
Yes.
But a record like that, or like when Nico Case started to hit, or Alejandro, or Justin Townes Earl, what we did with that is we look at this whole endeavor as a rising tide lifts all boats, that it allows us to, first of all, put money away for a rainy day, because we don't always have records doing well.
Right.
But also it allows us to take some more risks with bands that we believe in and want to invest in long term. So, Justin Townes Earl records help pay for early Lydia Loveless records. And Nico Case records help pay for Kelly Hogan or Scott Byram or, Robbie Fulks records. Everything informs something else.
No, that's a good point. And I think that's a beautiful thing too.
Part of our success, our nominal success, or our tenacity, or freakishly good luck on staying in business, is that we've never bought into the boom or bust mentality. That, okay, now that Ryan's doing really big, everything we do from now on needs to be really big. We need to hire more staff. We need to get another office, et cetera, et cetera. We wanted to stay very within our means to be able to support a lot of the oddball music that we will always love, stuff that will never sell that much, but we think, generally speaking, the world is a poorer place if they don't get to hear it.
Yeah.
So it allows us to not make money on certain things.
There's we've talked about the iconic artists. What goes in today to seeking out and signing some new undiscovered acts under that banner of weird music and of outside the box artists?
I'm sorry. What was the...
So you're still signing the new artists today? Like, what goes into searching out and finding these new artists?
In a lot of ways, it is as simple and naive a premise as it was when we started. We're still big music fans, and if we really like something, we will figure out a way to make it work. If they can't tour very often, then that all goes into the calculus of how much money you spend on promotion and how much to record it, and hopefully it will find its audience. When our recent artist who's doing very well right now, Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, when we first approached them, because I could not stop listening to their self-released album, she said, I'm a single mom, I can't go out there a lot. And I'm like, I get that. Let's figure out a way to do this.
That's awesome.
And we got the record out there, and it started to find its audience pretty quickly and got some great write-ups. And she started to get more opportunities, which allowed her to get away from home more. And thus far this year, they've just been touring enormously, way more than anyone thought. And that's because we didn't, lay down this gauntlet of, you have to do this or we can't work with you. 3 or 4 years ago, we put out a record by a female Danish pedal steel player. That's exactly the opposite of what the marketplace is looking for. But I love that record, and we figured out a way to do it that, if it may not have made money, but it certainly didn't lose money, and I'm proud to have it in the catalog, and I listen to it a lot. So
yeah. That's funny. I actually have a couple EPs that I've done with a pedal steel player. They're ambient pedal steel music and dobro, and it's just one of those things where it's like, this is meaningful for me. This is a companion to my life, and I'm going to put it out, and I'm going to spend money on physical. And if it doesn't make money, that's okay. It's for me.
Yeah. She's done a couple of gorgeous records for us, Maggie Bjorklund, and. not a household name, but I mean, why else do this if you can't do stuff you love? If all of a sudden you're just looking at sales figures and like, okay, that record did really well, or what's doing really well in the marketplace right now? We need to find a clone of that.
Yeah, all
That's
right.
never gone into our thinking. It really is just as simple and perhaps simple-minded.
You weren't in any way tempted to look for another Heartbreaker right after that to sign more
I wouldn't know the
singer-songwriters?
first. I mean, that's an insane and disingenuous proposition. It's not. I mean, that's not fair to anyone.
Right.
To look at this way, or to look at it that way. I mean, because looking at the first Heartbreaker, you had no idea.
That's right. Yeah.
And there are a handful of records in our catalog that I listen to and I go, how is this not huge?
Yeah.
And there's so many variables, and the music industry is many things, but it is not a meritocracy.
Yeah, no, that's right. Oh my gosh. Basically the best way to replicate success is just to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. When we first started and the old 97 started to do well, we signed Robbie Fulks and put out his first record, Country Love Songs. And we immediately started getting people saying, well, that doesn't sound like a Bloodshot release. What are you doing? And there was there's always going to be the certain segment of listeners who want you to just keep putting out the same old 97s record over and over and over again. And when we signed Nico Case, they were like, well, that doesn't sound like a Bloodshot artist. And it just goes on. And you're like, well, then I don't know what to tell you, because they're on the label. So therefore they are by definition a Bloodshot artist. And sometimes we try things and we fail, but again, we try and do it in a way that doesn't drag the whole label down into a smoldering ruin. I mean, we've seen over the years so many labels overexpand or try and go beyond their grasp or sell out or something, and then they just disappear, and that doesn't help anyone here. So I think artists trust us that we're not going to do something ridiculous like, okay, here's something starting to do well, let's start putting all our money behind it and try and make everyone sound like that, or try and follow that lead that is so out of your control. I was going to...
Yeah, go ahead. No, keep going.
There were times, certainly, when a lot of this stuff first started to hit and everyone thought, oh, okay, this is going to go mainstream. This is going to be, Wilco's going to be the next Nirvana or something ridiculous like that. We had a label guy fly here from one of the company towns, Nashville, LA, or Nashville, New York, or LA. I won't say which one. Okay. Flew here, got in a limo from the airport, came straight here with his assistant, came into our office / conference room, which is like a garbage picked coffee table and a sofa that, if it could talk, would scream, old and filthy. And made small talk for 5 minutes, and then he wrote something on a piece of paper and slid it over to me, and it was a number, and it was a buyout offer. And I was like, this really happens? This kind of stuff happens? Oh my goodness! And I looked at him, and I was like, I'm not, Ian McKay from Discord. I do have a price, but this isn't it. Yeah. And he made a couple more small talk things, and then he got back in his limo and went back to the airport and flew back. Oh man! And I was just like, I didn't get into this to work for other people. Yeah, sure. Or to be an A&R hack for something bigger. Why? There's a lot of other easier ways to make money than to be an indie label. So if you don't love what you do, why do it? Yeah, exactly. If I can't honestly stand at a show and be into what's going on, then why don't I just go sell toothbrushes or something? Yeah, that's right. That guy really had a cliche playbook. Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was like a movie. Just shaking our heads afterwards, like, oh my God, that shit really happens. Yeah, that's a great. And I know labels back then that took that piece of paper, and they're gone now. Right. And the artists that they believed in when they started are, I don't know where. Right.
There was an interview with you, and I want to talk about the economics of things a little bit, a few years back that I read. And the piece talked about trying to educate the audience on the basic economics of running a label and being an artist. And this is something actually that I've talked about with other labels, because it's easy to blame, these guys in the limos, or Apple or Spotify or Walmart. But it's important to understand for us that the average music fan has no idea what it costs to record or master or press a record, let alone have money left over to pay rent. Can a label do anything today to make music and artists more valued in society without sounding too preachy?
Well, that's the
that's the one question. I was hoping you had the answer.
Yeah. You just have to make people aware of what a valuable contribution they are. I mean, let's face it: Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Those people have never produced a note of music.
Right.
And they provide a service, sure, but at what cost? And I just feel like we're in an environment where there is a growing awareness of the value of locality, of small business, and of knowing the sources and all that. Yeah. Like, people want, the joke is people want to know the name of the chicken that they're eating.
Yeah.
and people are into locally crafted beer and spirits and the farmers markets and clothes and all that. Mm-hmm. It just seems like that hasn't translated into music, that people are just
100%.
There's now an entire generation of people that have had the entirety of recorded history at their fingertips for virtually nothing. So how do you explain to them that, okay, you love this band, streaming them on your digital service provider does not help them make a living. These are bands that are not going to be on Lollapalooza's stage. They're not going to be at the big festivals. How do you support them? Mm-hmm. And if you make the conscious decision to not do that, or you think that going there and buying a T-shirt whenever they're in town somehow helps, then you're really ignoring the reality of it. And that's all you can do is, and we fortunately have a very loyal core fan base that allows us some breathing room to try some more interesting things or try out new artists, knowing that they will support them. Mm-hmm. To a degree that it won't be a catastrophe if it doesn't sell. But to get out into the broader world, it's like you get so many people who are like, send me a record, give me free downloads, and I'll tag it on my Instagram feed. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't care. That doesn't help.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
I mean, so the broader issue is it goes well beyond, the travails of a middling independent label such as ourselves. It speaks to the broader issue of, as a society, how do we value art? Mm-hmm. Be it music, be it writing, be it photography, film, whatever. All these things are available for free all over the place, and that is kind of cheapening the entire endeavor. Friends who are photographers can't get work because, a magazine will just pull something off of someone's Instagram feed. And, so is that picture better? No, but it's free.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I mean, it's interesting you talk about the local aspect, and it just feels like somehow art and specifically music has slipped through the cracks of this pursuit of localizing everything. I mean, there's a cafe around the corner that sells baked goods from a local bakery. It's the beans are locally roasted. There's flowers from a gardener for sale there, but then the music is just Spotify. It's just
Absolutely, and
it's very interesting.
It's great, and it's an amazing source of creativity, and it makes communities more interesting. And the area I live in, Chicago, it's like totally self-contained. I don't ever have to leave this neighborhood. Yeah, so many interesting things going on. So why will that person who is willing to pay $18 for a basil-infused vodka with fresh raspberries from down the street with ice cubes made from some cast iron thingy that a local guy made to make special cubes. Why are they offended to pay more than like 1/1 billionth of a penny for a song that they really like?
Yeah. Or is anybody committing to just listening to music within a 20-mile radius?
Yeah. So
interesting.
We've been lucky in Chicago, or being in Chicago. I don't think we would have survived in any other place, because the local community does seem to have a certain amount of pride and civic awareness of having a label like us exist here and being part of the community. And we try and be a good member of the community, and lots of shows and festivals and fundraisers and stuff like that. And so we do have a base of support here and an awareness that we are a Chicago label. But yeah, it's tough, and that's all you can do is help people realize that being out on the road, being away from your family, being away from a real job is tough enough as it is. To not get paid for it, a lot of bands are just throwing in the towel, or we've had to pass on a lot of projects and consider that those are albums. That's art that hasn't been created.
Yeah, that's right.
There are voices that are lost in a way because there's no viable model to get them out there.
Are you still optimistic?
Yeah. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I am an unrepentant curmudgeon. However, you do not run a independent label without being at your core a total optimist. That every day you come in here, you believe what you do. You think that this record by this artist, people are going to be way into, and 5 years from now they're going to be a lot bigger, and you're a part of that. And you believe that it has value. So yeah, there are so many reasons to just find a bucket of gasoline and throw a match at it in the office here, but you believe it. So
does the 25 years make you more temperate? Can these changing eras slide off your back a little more?
Oh yeah. I'm not nearly as the highs aren't as high, but the low certainly not as low. I'm definitely much more. Okay, I've seen somebody screw up that badly before. It's not the end of the world.
Right. I don't want to take too much.
We've been screwed over by better people.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to take any more of your time, but I wanted to ask you something specifically, for some of the artists that are, because some of our listeners are not just DIY labels or indie labels, but are also just DIY artists who try to record their own music or self-release their own music at least. A lot of artists, and this is from some of my conversations, a lot of artists think their success is linked to the quality of production or having a good press photo or website, basically looking and sounding pro. And I mean, especially after, we listen and we hear from some labels like yourself who are more established. Is that the right approach for an indie artist or an indie label? Where should their focus be?
Their focus should be, here's the thing. Every independent label is owned by essentially a crackpot, an idiosyncratic crackpot who likes different things for different reasons, that has no particular possibly business sense. We get really professional looking demos in here and we almost immediately throw them away.
Right.
Whereas somebody once sent us a CD with it just had written on it Iowa doom metal in Sharpie. I listened to that one. I mean, you never know. I mean, but I would say we're all very strange individuals. Do your homework. If you think that a label that they track well with what you're doing, either not even necessarily sonically, but with the attitude, then send something along and send some links to some live performances, because I've been sent really nice things that people who I respect and have been friends with for years will be like, oh, this is a perfect fit for Bloodshot. And I'll listen to it and I go, what do you think we do? then I'll be standing in the back of a room at a random show and just be like, I love this. And I don't know why. And it is very it is very, for us, and I can only speak for us, it is very organic and very visceral and totally unpredictable. There are things that have sat on my desk for weeks, if not months, and then I'll hear and go, I'll be like, wait, where's this been all my life? Oh, it's sitting right in front of me. Maybe I'm having a bad day. I mean, there's so many variables that you just got to keep plugging away and working on what you can control, which is your performance and your songwriting and grabbing the audience, because nothing is more
that's true
appealing to a label, to an independent label that might have more business sense than us, which is presumably most of them. Nothing is more appealing than walking into a room with a band you've never heard of and watching that room be full and people be into it and watch them perform admirably.
Right.
That is your first step in the door. I mean, and even if you have all of that, if I don't like the music, then I don't care.
Yeah, that's right.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's as simple and infuriating as that.
That's right. It's so subjective.
Submitting a demo is like not only like walking on a tightrope, it's like walking on an invisible tightrope.
Yeah.
On the other end is shaking. So
do you have a demo policy? Do you accept demos?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's a beautiful thing.
We have a wall of shame in our bathroom that we put up some of the more unfortunate. We have found people through the demos. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really, that's great to hear. I love hearing that. And you must get a lot.
We get a lot of links to things.
Yes, that's right.
Which is good. You know, I don't miss the days of filling up a trash can every couple of weeks with demos.
Yeah.
That are full of all kinds of clutter and flyers, and we've shared the stage with, and
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the classic one.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, listen, I have so much admiration.
One other little pet peeve.
Yeah, go on.
People should avoid math problems.
What does that mean? It
means we're 1 part this plus 2 parts that.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes. Say the less is more in those pitches.
Yeah, again, it's totally random what people like us get into.
There's Rob, there's something surreal talking to you, thinking that you signed a band or released a record that I had on a road trip 15 years ago, and I love that. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Let me just say that thank you, first of all, but we're just part of at our best at the moment, at those rare moments where I'm allowing myself to pat myself on the back and take a modicum of credit or satisfaction in what we've done and not focus on my failures and shortcomings. I would like to think that we are a pretty good member of a continuum of independent music. And to your comment, we put out that Knitters tribute record, Poor Little Knitter on the Road, around 1999, 2000. It had Whiskey Town on it and the old 97s. And the Knitters were a band that completely floored me back in college when everyone was listening to Sub Pop stuff and, and Blizzard and all that. I was starting to get into this weird country stuff, and I loved X, and this side project, the Knitters, just absolutely changed the trajectory of things for me. And when we put that record out, they reformed. Oh. Did a few shows up the West Coast, and I flew out to Portland to see them, and it was just such a huge thrill. And I said almost the same thing you just said to me to Exene and John Doe.
That's awesome. It's just circle of life.
We're just part of this great weird thing.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this. It's been fun. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you so much to Rob Miller of Bloodshot Records for taking the time to chat with me for the show. It's such a huge honor, such a great label. Make sure you check them out. It's so easy to go to a record shop and find one of their records, and I encourage you to do that or hop on a playlist and and go deep in their catalog. Thank you for listening. Again, one of the things that you could do that would be really helpful to the podcast, in addition, of course, to sharing it with people, and I know that our listeners have done that, thank you. But the other thing you can do is go to iTunes and leave a review. I read those. They're very encouraging. I think there's something algorithmically that it does, but please leave a review and a rating. I would love that so much. Go to otherrecordlabels.com to download our free guide. If you are thinking about starting a record label or in the process of running a record label, and you need a little bit of wisdom and guidance, I've put together a little package of a lot of that from our interviews over the years. So go to otherrecordlabels.com to check that out. Thanks for listening.